Ji Ka Khalsa, Vai Ki Fateh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Media Watch. I'm your host, Dr. Savi. Now, we always try and find some really amazing guests, and today we've got a really interesting guest, only interesting because things that affect us every day in our lives are the relationships that we have with our families, with our friends, and I've got a wonderful person. His name is Harpal. Vai Ki Khalsa, Vai Ki Fateh. So Harpal Singh is a specialist in this area, and it's interesting, even in government, people have to have good relationships with each other. A lot of people talk about whether or not they are getting on with a particular minister or not with a minister, or they have a shuffle. I know that there'll be a budget happening, so it's important to also negotiate all the information before you communicate it, but that isn't always the case sometimes, because there's often problems or disagreements or U-turns that take place, especially when it comes to financial matters. But I thought we'd actually specialise on this particular area this week, and I wanted to really meet somebody who was a real specialist in this area. So Harpal, tell us a little bit about your background before we get going into your other passion with your 5 other partners that you have, not marriage partners, business partners, and marriage only in the sense that because you also happen to be one of the directors of Sikh Shaadi UK.com. Is that right?
I'd rather use the word Sevadara than
Sevadara, okay, right. But tell us, where are you qualified in these areas? Is it something that you do as a professional?
Yes, I'm qualified in counselling. I've got a master's in counselling, and I've worked on a number of relationships, as you said, be it with yourself, with someone else, couples, also one-to-one therapy as well. So it's about allowing people to talk about certain things that happen and affect them on a day-to-day basis. Do you
do things in like corporate as well with business teams where people will have to have a tight business relationship with their senior management, and especially even if you look at government, you know, and people sometimes go a bit rogue, don't they? And they start using social media to, you know, not talk nicely about each other. You know,
that's when communication breakdown occurs between two people, and that can be either in, as you said, in government, in senior figures, or it can be in husband and wives. And nowadays, it's one of those things. Communication is quite key in terms of working with corporates. I've not done that just yet. I'm still focusing on the one-to-ones and group work and
more family-orientated stuff.
Yeah, it's coming for me. When I first ventured onto this, it was finding someone in my community who speaks my language was a bit difficult, especially when it comes to relationships. Especially nowadays with divorce being quite happening, there was no one I can go to and say, this is arranged marriage or this is how culture is. And sometimes it got to a stage where people go, are you still living with your father and your mother? And it's like, yes, what's wrong with that? But some people it's quite alienated. So breaking those taboos, breaking those bonds, and especially working with the relationships and on the fringe of working on mental health as well. That's been quite a big taboo to work with.
Do you think there's a taboo in society generally, or specifically is there a chance of denial in one sense, that there isn't a problem in certain communities?
Depending on which community you speak to, it could be either or, both, or neither. And that's quite key, because quite a lot of people don't like talking about the issues. Coming up from our heritage, it's kind of dasnani, don't keep it out, keep it in-house, sort it out and work with it. And that can be great if you've got people who know what they're doing and have balanced views and work with it. But sometimes if they're not, and you kind of hide things and sweep it under the carpet and expect nothing to happen, and that can be quite dangerous.
Yeah, because it's not visible, and it could get worse. You think, if people keep it, you know, kind of underground and sweep it under the sofa, under your sofa.
Yeah. It's just one of those things when you've got something wrong with your physical body, you'll go to a GP, you get it sorted out, go get x-rays done, you'll be quite immediate. But when it comes to mental health, it's quite different. People go, I'll leave it, I'll sort it out, I want to go there, or GPs and all this, so it can be quite difficult.
Do you think it's one of those things that eats away at an individual? That if there is you could say got stress in the workplace, you know, and then it starts kind of filtering into the main life, and then sometimes it's like I said before about the denial thing, but it does eat away at the person. Do you think a person's personality can change sometimes if they're too stressed?
It certainly can. People's anxiety, people's anger, people's stress level, it can really take an effect on them, especially with men. men tend not to speak about their problems, the issues. They're always kind of, especially in our community, it's a man's meant to be the head of the house, strong-willed, nothing can go wrong. If you see a person cry or a man cry in our community, that's the biggest sign of weakness. But if actually being in tune with the emotion is the biggest. It's the biggest thing you can actually do. It's the biggest breakthrough you can do. Being both emotionally and mentally stable.
Right. So we were talking earlier on. You know, you deal with the relationships. There's kind of like a pre and post in one sense. I never thought about the pre stuff, which is, and I think you cited that maybe Church of England sometimes they get couples before they get married to spend time to actually understand, not compatibility, but just understanding. You know, kind of reaching and understanding. What are they doing during those meetings, do you think?
Most of the
Did
time
you do something similar to that?
Not in the Sikh faith, no. It's one of those things. Part of their marriage is to go to pre-marriage counselling. Sometimes it could be understanding what religion plays a part in their marriage, realising there is a we now, not an I anymore, and working as a couple, how things are. It may be part of their training they get to understand what being marriage is about, what the values, what the sacred, understanding what marriage is. Like nowadays, if someone gets a nankaraj done, Jar Lama, and they go around.
Do they understand that what each lama actually means? That Guru Ram Das wrote this amazing Jar Lama, and each one means something different, and it talks about the unification of the soul. Two souls into one. Do people really understand it? I mean, I know there was a wedding recently that I went to, family wedding, and the couple actually did give out the translation of the Lawa, and it's just incredibly beautiful. But also the congregation in the Darbar were able to follow it through as each Lawa took place. Do you think there's an understanding between couples about what it really, really means?
Sometimes with marriage nowadays, it's the biggest thing for a woman to be in. She gets dressed up, she's centre of attention, and Jar Lava are very sacred. They're very in depth about how the link between the two couples, the link between you and your guru and everything are. But it's just one of those things. You're probably one of the rarest occasions where I've actually listened to where the two couples have actually gone ahead and listened or understood the values.
They understood it so much that they actually had it printed and given out a very beautiful, card presentation with the gold wrapping on it.
But how many weddings have we gone to and
where I've seen that?
That's not being addressed.
No, I don't think I've seen that many. No.
Yeah. But there are. I've been to loads of programs where they've got translations of Gurbani on screen, on big screens, which Gurdwaras can potentially use for people to understand. Nowadays, marriages in Gurdwaras, people who attend the weddings are not necessarily going to be Sikh. So you get...
It's good for them, isn't it?
Yeah,
if they're not from a Sikh background, then they've actually got the translation and they can actually see how beautiful it really is.
Yeah, it's getting a verbal and a physical understanding of what the Lama are and what the values are.
So do you think there should be some pre-wedding counselling? Do you think? What's your opinion about that?
I strongly agree to it. I strongly think that is something that is really needed, especially in this day and age where divorce rates are extremely high. Understanding... normally when I talk about relationships, I use a generic ABC, which is attitude, behaviour and communication. If you've got a good attitude, your behaviour is good and you're communicating well, a relationship will flourish. Obviously there are more factors to it, but if you keep it to basics, that's pretty much the ABC of relationships.
That's really nice. Yeah, good way to remember it actually, yeah. And that's on both parties, isn't it?
Everything. It's one of the things because in our religion we believe quite in of equality. Everything is equal, man and wife. You can have a Harpal Singh and you can have a Harpal Kaur. So if it's applicable to Harpal Singh, it should be applicable to Harpal Kaur. Should be no, in terms of no
difference. Yeah.
No difference at all. It should be equal in every sense.
Well, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about Sikh Shaadi, it's called, isn't it?
Sikh Shaadi
UK.com.
Yeah.
Right?
SikhShaadi UK.com.
So you were telling me a little bit about this, but I want to hear the whole story because I only got a snippet of it. So were you at a Gurdwara, or were you somewhere where you were talking about this with a bunch of guys and girls?
It was literally we were at a Gurdwara event, just being introduced, a formal thing, and there's about 4 or 5 of us just hanging around, and as you do, you normally have a job or next time, and one person goes, well, this event's crap, and it could be run much better, and the other person goes, all right, then do it then. He goes, I can do a better job, and there was a conversation going between two, and then at the end of it, it's like, fine, I will do it. And this person then, unfortunately, couldn't come today. He took the ownership and actually started Sikh Shaadi UK, started developing it and working with like-minded people to work on.
You could argue there's so many sites. I won't list them all, but there are many different sites, aren't there? You know, there's the Harmonies and the Shaadi.coms, and there's loads of them. I mean, there's just two that I just thought of on the top of my head. And I have seen your poster in the Wrexham Gurdwara, actually. It's very good.
Thank you.
I think not only do you have the website, but you also have events that you run as well, don't you?
Yes, we have certain events, and there's 3 criteria for our event. The criteria is, first of all, you've got to be Sikh, you've got to be single, and you've got to be a UK citizen. As long as you fulfill those 3 criteria, you're allowed in. If you're not fulfilling those criteria, you will be refused entry.
But what would be special about your site then?
In terms of our website is pretty generic. It allows like-minded people to actually see themselves. So our website doesn't show who and what is on our database. It's purely designed for our events, for people to come to have a look at people, because nowadays, without sounding rude, you've got so many apps that can change a picture phenomenally.
Oh yeah, okay.
You can't see what's going on. And
so they get to see the real person face to face and experience what it's like in terms of meeting them. Yeah.
The ability to speak to someone, to get to know on a one-to-one basis. Because if you're good at English literature, you can write a fantastic introduction to yourself. But if you're not haven't got those people skills, or not being able to talk to someone, or that communication, that spark sometimes you need, it can only be done if you see someone face to face.
Is it doing well?
It is pretty well. As we're going, it's starting our 3rd year now.
Okay.
We started off in Slough. We've done events in Manchester, Coventry, Leeds, and we've got links with other events that are running. We've got one running Smethwick as well. So it's about working collaboratively with other people.
So is that the hardest part to actually get the word out? Because people, you know, you mentioned about apps. People say we could develop an app, but it costs maybe, I don't know what the figure is, but it's loads of. It's in the multiples in terms of the percentages to actually get somebody to know that you got an app. There could be 100,000 apps or whatever on a particular, you know, whether it be an Android store, or I think it's more than that. I think there's been like 500,000, I think, on Android as well as Apple. How do you become one of that million, further segmented into finding somebody on the right website that you go to? So how do people know about your website? How difficult is that? Do you use social media? Do you do events where you've got posters? Do you talk to Gurdwara committees? What do you do?
Well, you started the show off talking about Wrexham Gurdwara and having our posters there. Our team do actually go around in various Gurdwaras and promote.
And they're okay with that, yeah?
Some Gurdwaras are more fortunate, but sometimes you have to meet a Pradhan, and it's not always a case of being there, so sometimes you have to come back. So there's different Gurdwaras have different understandings of how things are. So majority of the Gurdwaras that we go to are pretty much on board of what we're doing. Just to let you know, our event is free. We don't charge anyone to use our services.
And the website's free as well?
Everything is free.
Right.
It's designed, everyone who does it is we call ourselves Sevadars. We actually do it on the basis that we are promoting it, and we're not here for any financial gain.
Yeah, some Gurdwaras actually have lists, don't they? They have a Sikh matrimonial service, don't they?
Sure, they do. Everyone has their own way of doing it, and that's their seva. And hats off to them for providing that seva to them, because doing that work and doing everything, it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy, and all of them doing a wonderful job. Just wish somehow we can collaboratively all work together. Because at the end of the day, our mission is the same. It's to provide Sikhs with partners for them in terms of marriage.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the work that you specifically do with people, right? So you mentioned earlier on, so it's like, you know, we went from marriage to talk about divorce, but let's talk about it from a positive perspective.
Sure.
Through working with you or working through some of the organisations that you work with, how do you feel when you see the success stories? Well, first of all, are there success stories? And how do you feel when you get that?
Yeah, there's loads of success stories. Those who wish to make it work will make it work. whichever person comes in front of me, either it be for a mental case or for relationship support, if they want it to work, it'll work. You can be sitting in front of the best therapist in the world. If you do not want it to work, it will never work.
So are you saying that they should, is there something that you have to do to get them to realise that it could work? Or should they come to a session with the attitude that the reason why I'm here is because I want to make it work? Because it could be sometimes people turn up and, they're so poles apart, you're going to have to try and build, the commonality, to rediscover themselves again.
It's certainly the case of both. Sometimes you have to work on the good, focus on what's going on, and work on how things are going. And especially in relationships, over a period of time, there's going to be differences that will come across with people. But most of the times it's about communicating.
How much psychology is there involved in that? Because it is a psychological thing as well, isn't it? Like,
it certainly is. Any relationships, that can be even with your mother, your father, your siblings, it all has its nooks and crannies somewhere around there. And it's about working with that understanding and working on the relationship and wanting it to work. It's quite easy to break a relationship, but to maintain it takes a lot of effort and time.
So you mentioned that the C in that is like communications, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes communications aren't necessarily one-to-one. They could be one-to-many, can't they?
Certainly is.
Especially when, either people are living together in a single family, or, there's possible interference, inverted commas, mm-hmm. or different expectations from different, groups of the families, because sometimes there's two families come together, there's different expectations. I mean, how do you tread that fine line to make sure everyone's sweet and happy? Or create an environment where maybe that isn't an issue anymore?
Sometimes the strongest bond you've got to have is between you two. If you can have that communication bond with you, you can then work with others. If the bond between the husband and wife is not strong, regardless of how the families are, how siblings are, it's not going to work.
But what about the politics though sometimes? The politics behind, sometimes if there's a relationship between two people, one person is being kind of influenced by somebody else, and that kind of gets through and it creates a frustration, Because I've seen that in some cases where it's like somebody wants to say something to someone direct, but it'll be indirect, and the indirect comms causes the issue and the problem,
It comes down to the attitude and behaviour of the ABCs. You've got to physically think about actually what's going on here. And once again, it's going back to the I, we and us, taking away the I and working on the us. Rather, if you've got I've had a situation where people have gone on and nitpicked at what the problem is in the relationship, but yet, on the same token, they can quite easily go, actually, what can we do now to resolve this? And I've been in situations where people argue, and by the time they finish the argument, the point that they had is not relevant.
Can it be sometimes like petty arguments as well, isn't it? Like little things, isn't it?
Well, it works on emotions,
yeah.
Especially when you're in anger mode. First of all, your breathing goes.
Yeah.
You're not breathing straight, so your heart is pumping deoxygenated blood around your body, goes to your brain, then the brain is actually then saying, actually, I've got to do something, so you go to fight, flight, or freeze mode.
Yeah.
And then whatever comes into the mind, the body releases out. So sometimes when you're in heated exchange in a relationship, you don't actually make sense all the time, or you'll pick up on stuff that you did 10, 20 years ago and just bring it out because that's where the mind is in. But sometimes when you stop, you breathe, you focus, and actually, what is the problem? Oh, I've left the toilet seat up. Darling, I'm very sorry. Won't do it again. Let's work with
it. So it could be a minor, but it's kind of an underlying irritating thing.
It can be as minor as that, or it could be as major as something else, or cheating, or working on and having affairs, which ultimately could potentially lead to divorce, which is quite common nowadays.
So do you think it's increasing, do you think?
It certainly is increasing a lot.
Do you think it's down to the pressure of living? In terms of, we live in a fast-paced life, everyone's on chats on, things like WhatsApp and social media and stuff. Do you think we've got X amount of time to watch X number of TV programs, one serial after another on Netflix? Someone's got a different interest to somebody else. Do you think that all of that compounds into what probably didn't happen maybe 20 years ago because there was only 4 channels on TV?
TV media is a big thing, but nowadays it's a lot of people don't have time.
Yeah,
time is very, very precious. sitting down and talking to someone is worth its weight in gold. Being in a position where you can talk to someone and talk about your insecurities, what your flaws are, and how things are quite difficult to you, because with stresses of work and strains of work, it's really, really hard. And especially myself, I live in London, and the commute from your work to your home, and
that's a killer, isn't it?
That's a killer,
take time, yeah.
And can stress you out. And it's one of those things. Quite a lot of people not talking nowadays, and especially with social media and apps, they'll text each other and say how things are. But with a text message, you're not going to get your point across. You can get what's black and white.
It can be misconstrued as well. People write text, which is, I didn't mean that, I meant that, Because text messages and WhatsApp, they're fantastic, but they don't convey your emotions, your thoughts, your processes. As a quick update, apparently you can now delete your WhatsApp messages. That's in the latest version of WhatsApp. You can delete them if you sent them by accident. There's going to be a little inner editor in your head saying, maybe I shouldn't have sent that. Delete.
A lot of relationships have broken up
because of WhatsApp. Because
messages.
of WhatsApp. Very good. Not very good. Or sent to the wrong group, unfortunately. So that's a very interesting area, actually. This whole thing about maintaining relationships and obviously that balance of living as well as living for each other.
It's probably I was in a conference recently, and one of the guys goes, it's easier to have a living out girlfriend who you meet for 3 hours, best behaviour, wine, dine, and work through what it is, than to have someone living with you 24 hours a day.
Right.
Because in that 3 hours you can be your best behaviour. But when you live with someone, when you're in a marriage with someone, or nowadays cohabiting with someone, it can be quite difficult.
Is that old joke when you see a man and a woman in a car, if they're not talking to each other, they're probably married, but if they are talking to each other, they're not married yet, because they got so used to each other,
It's one of those things, if I said to you as an individual, do you really know yourself? Because when you were slightly younger, when you weren't a doctor, your thoughts, your processes were different. Now you're a qualified doctor, and your thoughts and processes have changed. So even when we take it from a personal perspective and bring on, you look at yourself, you don't know who you are, what you are. You don't know what you can be thinking in 5 years' time from now.
What do you think of a lot of people are following this kind of like mindfulness and that kind of, is it all nice and complementary? Does it help a person realise who they are and what they're doing at a particular time?
If it helps you, it helps you. There's no right or wrong, it's whatever suits you. There's no one size fits all.
Right.
Whatever complementary, mindfulness, if it's NLP, if it's counselling, whatever it is that helps you, try it.
Yeah, so try it, but it can help, I suppose, can't it?
With anything, if you want it to work, it'll work. Even if you went to someone and spoke to them, back in the days, you used to have a benjat, and so if something goes wrong with the family, go to benjat, there's 5 of them there, and you used to speak to them, 5 wise people, something goes wrong, they're wise enough to say, actually, look at this and how things are. So sometimes, even when I talk to people about state of mind, I normally say you've got 3 states. You've got the emotional state of mind is something happens and your emotions take over. So, I'll give you an example. You're going to a supermarket and you see the words sale on and buy one get 2 free, or oh my god, I've got to get this.
Off in it, buy one get one free.
Buy one get one free. And so you impulse your thoughts, and your mind works on impulse. And then you've got the rational side or reasonable side of mind, actually sits back and goes, actually, am I actually gaining from this? Or I got one of these bogos before, but it's still in my cupboard. Do I really need one? And then you come to the wise mind, which actually sometimes is mostly called the hindsight mind, where you realise afterwards that actually, what am I doing?
Was it shoulda, woulda, coulda? Yeah.
And coming back to relationships, when something happens, someone's not turning up for a date, or someone's put more salt in their dal or something. My God, that's it. People can
go crazy,
go crazy, or the unknown as well.
Absolutely.
So you've got different stages of minds that you have to work through.
Really, really interesting stuff. But we could talk all night about this. You're very knowledgeable about the whole thing. We wish you all the success with SikhShaadi UK.com. Brilliant idea, and let it go from strength to strength. Also, all the things that you do, good luck with that, and also well done for helping all those people in a positive way. And I hope you continue to do that and you flourish and do your practices as well as you can. So thanks very much, Harpal, for coming to the show. Really appreciate it. Well, that's it. I'm afraid it's the end of the show. We really hope you enjoyed meeting our wonderful guests this time round. Explored a whole load of new areas in terms of how to do your day-to-day life in a better way, in terms of thinking about it, thinking about relationships, and understanding that it's a good idea to breathe before you actually go crazy. Always good to be positive and have an optimistic outlook as well in relationships. That's all we have for this week. We look forward to seeing you next time. Wai Kajika Khalsa, Wai Kajika Fateh.